He has been part of MSU since 1980. He is a plant pathologist by training. He was the chair of the plant pathology department for 12 years. He's very interested in applied research, so one of his specialties is potato blight, I think. And so he, something with potatoes. So he's one of you, he's a horticulturist. And he very much values, taking the research and speaking to growers and helping them solve some of their practical problems. So he's going to speak to you today about the importance of Master Gardeners to Extension. So please welcome Dr. Hammerschmidt.
So actually, I think I'm wired. Am I wired? Well, I'm really wired. I've been meeting with legislators, and it's a very interesting experience. So now I can look more like a nightclub singer.
It should be on.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. It's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to come and speak with you. As Clara said, I'm a plant pathologist by training. I'm really not a good horticulturalist, and there's a story that Mary knows, and some of you know pretty well, is that, 4 or 5 years ago, 4 years ago, you had a grant to do some training on campus, and somebody had to talk about boxwood blight, and Jan Byrne in Diagnostic Services didn't have the time to do this. I'm quite familiar with the disease because I head up the diagnostic lab and a regional effort in diagnostics, and so it fell down to me to give this presentation. And I went home and I was kind of grumpy about it, and because I didn't really want to do this because I didn't even know what boxwoods were. And so my wife very kindly had me look out the window to our front yard. And so I think you understand the rest of the story. So I know plants by their diseases, and if it's a potato, particularly a rotting tuber, I'm very comfortable with those kinds of things. But in other words, keep me out of your gardens in the summertime, although I do like diseases and I do like to keep them under check. But it's a pleasure to be here because you as a group are very important to your communities and the folks that you work with. And you're also important to MSU Extension in that you help deliver a lot of the information that we feel is necessary to get to our various stakeholders and clients, and that includes all the individuals that you work with very, very frequently. And it's been really good to be able to partner with the Master Gardener Association. You've done a lot in the last few years. MSU Extension has gone through a lot in the last few years, and I'm learning this very quickly. And something that Claire didn't mention to you is that a year ago at this time, I had no idea I'd be doing this, either here or the job. In fact, it's only been about 8 months, and so I've been learning a lot of things very, very quickly and absorbing a lot of information and trying to figure out where we're going to go. But I appreciate very much what you have all done over the last several years as we've gone through some significant transitions and budget changes and things like that to keep the organization and the Master Gardeners going. I don't completely understand all the changes that took place several years ago. We've learned a lot of things that have worked, perhaps, some things that didn't work. We certainly need to revisit some of the issues, and I'm beginning to learn these things from Mary and her group as to some of the problems that arose as a result of some of the restructuring. We're trying to get our hands around it because it's very important to me, number one, as a plant scientist, that we have the ability to speak with everyone about plants. And it's particularly important for me for sort of a selfish reason because a lot of what you do involves looking at plants on a daily basis. And one of the things that I am concerned about, it doesn't keep me up at night very much, not frequently anyway, is issues related to things like boxwood blight. If you've ever seen this disease, and we haven't had it in Michigan, it can take out a plant in a matter of a few days. It's a very devastating disease. It's regulated. It's still a problem in some parts of the state. But why you folks are so important for things like this is you can be that first line of detection. You can work with your volunteers. You can learn more about these things, learn about new pests and diseases, and you can actually help on the forefront of stopping new invasives or even other diseases that may be popping up. If you look around in a number of retail outlets where we get nursery plants, for example, there's occasionally these issues where rhododendrons are shipped out of Oregon that have remorum blight or sudden oak death. And sometimes these things they slip through the cracks. They're not inspected. The disease is asymptomatic when it comes to a place like Michigan. If it gets out of the landscape, then we have real problems. And so one of the things where I see real value, in addition to all the good things that you do in helping people with their gardening, is to basically help us serve as that first line of defense against new invasives, which can be very devastating both to the landscape but also to the industries that help supply these plants. I've been privy to a little bit of the information coming out of the survey that Claire and Bonnie are taking care of. I've looked at some of the information, and it's very useful information for me as I get my hands on this, but it's also clear to me that we need to make some improvements in communication, in transparency, in how we deliver programs. There were certain things put in place which I'm not sure I completely understand, things we need to work through. I firmly believe that we need to have hands-on training in a number of cases, although I also understand the need to have distance education as well. So we need to find those balances between these things. For the life of me, I don't see how you can learn how to manipulate plants in certain ways without actually physically being with the plant and dealing with these things. Other things obviously lend themselves to distance education very well. But in addition to that, it's that one-on-one contact or 1-on-30 contact, or however you want to put this thing into place, that really makes an impression. Even in folks that may want to stay with the program beyond some initial educational programs, will remember the person's giving them that training, that new bits of education, and move forward. I really want to commend our consumer heart folks, as well as all of you here, to taking the time to participate in this very important planning process. One of the things which I value is having good strategic plans for moving things forward. And as we're moving ahead across all of Extension, one of the areas which we need to do a much better job at is doing strategic planning and position planning. We're through, I think, the worst of some of the budget cuts. As you may recall, a few years ago we took about a 15% budget reduction, which resulted actually in a loss of about 72 educator positions across the organization in terms of content, but we also had some folks shift their emphases to other areas, and consumer horticulture was an area that I think probably suffered more than a bit from the fact that educators that used to work with a lot of the programs really had to be refocused on other areas, and this is something we need to look at as we move forward. The impacts also affected campus. We had about 20 academic staff and faculty positions that were eliminated as a result of that. That decreases our capacity. And again, when we rely on faculty specialists to provide content, horticulturalists, entomologists, and of course the always wonderful plant pathologists. All right, maybe not so wonderful. We have to have that content comes from somewhere, and so having connections with campus are very important. One of the things which Mary heard me speak about, she came up a couple weeks ago now to speak with the MSU Extension administrative team, which consists of myself, Patrick Hudney, who's the associate director, our HR and business staff, along with the other 3 institute directors, right? I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute, and the district coordinators. And Mary came up and talked to us about the program and what plans you had in place to move the program forward and make it even stronger. And as part of the discussion that Mary got to sit in on was an overall plan for us to do better strategic planning. And within the different institutes, of which the Consumer Hort team is pretty much within the Agriculture and Agribusiness Institute, these different teams or sub-teams need to be thinking strategically about long-term plans. And that includes everything from how do you cover programs in a timely fashion, geographically, content, but also down the road for staffing. What do we look at as we get out of the road? Now, Mary mentioned that some of the consumer court team are a little older. No comment. But we need to think about this very carefully. Is how do we look to the future to make sure that we have the capacity and the folks in these positions to actually help serve the groups, particularly like you, that they work with. So each of the teams, as we start looking to the future within the Ag Institute, are going to be having to look towards some significant strategic planning. We can make some estimates as to how many folks might retire in the next 5, 10 years. You know, it's hard to judge that, but at least some planning in place, we can look forward to seeing how we can allocate our resources in the most effective way as we move towards the next 10 to 15 years. So I'll stop here and I'll just leave it open for any questions you may have. Yes, ma'am.
Are you ever going to look at having distance learning software that can get out into the real urban areas like some?
The question is, are we going to have real distance education software and get into the more rural areas? And I assume what you're meaning is the fact that we don't have good connectivity with the internet and things like that. You can't afford it. And so the issues of the equipment or the connections or a combination of both.
I think if you've got the correct software, you can get there. We've got web everywhere.
Okay. So it's a matter of having the right things to work with, the right tools. And so that's a very important question. Those are the kinds of things that we need to hear about through your planning process. We need to identify where those gaps are. I can sit on campus and think about things, but we can't do anything unless we have your input. And through your planning process and through the efforts of Mary and the rest of the team, putting together, basically it's a needs assessment as well. Where are the gaps? What do we need to do, and how do we think about moving to the future and trying to invest in these kinds of things? So that's an excellent question, and something which I'm sure I can see Mary shaking her head that we'll certainly take a look at. Because if we want to be successful in that kind of technology, we have to have the right tools in the right place with the right people. Yes, sir.
I might mention that you talked about attrition in your staff through retirement. You may want to look at the attrition of membership of the Master Gardeners through whatever means. You know, they may move out of the state or die or, you know, whatever.
And so, and I think that's a very well taken point, is, you know, looking at attrition and loss in membership in the Master Garden Association, and again, in finding out why people leave, finding out what it is, and
how you fill those vacant holes.
And so again, I would think the same thing. That's part of a planning process that the whole group needs to be engaged in, not just obviously the MSUE folks, but all of you, to take a real hard look at this kind of assessment. Can you project maybe where the gaps might be? Do you know when somebody leaves? And so those are very important things to take into account. And again, as you go through your planning process, keep that as one of the issues that you need to think about, because without people, you can't have a program. Yes?
I've got one quick comment I'd like to make on behalf of our area master gardeners. When Michigan State decided there were going to be some changes in the program, our area master gardeners felt abandoned and betrayed by Michigan State and went through that grieving process as anyone would, and have since moved on. But I want you to know that you being here today is really important for us to see, because we felt abandoned by Michigan State, whether that was intentional or not. And I think this has been a big step when we can go back to our group and say, hey, this is where we're at now and this is what is happening. And so I think that's going to be, for our group, for Montcalm County, it's going to be very important for them to understand that you're rebuilding those, what they perceived as good bridges.
Yeah, and I've heard that more than one time, and I can understand the sense of abandonment, and I'm beginning to understand more and more about what happened several years ago. Again, I'll be perfectly honest, at that time, I was living in my own little world on South Campus, not really paying too much attention to these kinds of things. Although traveling to Montcalm, because I do some work at the station there in the potatoes.
Very pretty potatoes.
Oh, it's a great place. It's got some good disease there too, which is always a plus.
I told the ladies I wanted to talk to you.
But anyway, actually, I work more on scab, which is even a better problem than blight. Blight we can deal with. We've got fungicides for that. But I think that's made some very good points, and I certainly appreciate your comments.
Well, and it wasn't meant to be hurtful, but it was
Oh,
meant
no.
to tell you that our group, I think, is beginning to feel like that those bridges are being rebuilt and I want you to know we appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate your
Because I
comments.
know it hasn't been easy for you coming in like that.
No, but I've had some good background information given to me, and it's been a fairly interesting journey trying to understand everything that happened, and I'm slowly getting a handle on it. But I'm really hoping we can move forward, and I think this planning process is going to really help move the program forward, maybe heal some of the wounds that may still exist. And I understand it takes time to get over these things, but that we on campus are very supportive. And one of the things, well, I'm going to get off topic again, so I'll maybe go back to any questions. Yes, ma'am.
I think along with improving communication and transparency, which was hit time and time again on the surveys and in the focus group, I think we also need to become acutely aware that visibility is critical. And it goes back to Nancy's comment, the more visible MSU Extension, MMGA, Master Gardener, BMS, and the individual Master Gardeners become, that improves our strength and the community's knowledge of who we are and what we do.
And so really the comment was making sure we're as visible as possible as partners. And this is something which we can work on. I know that I can discuss some of this with our communications folks to see what we can do to move these things forward. I have mechanisms of getting information out every week. There's an article that goes out called Spotlight and some other communications that come out from the director's office, and always thinking for things to talk about. And this actually just this meeting is something to highlight as a positive step forward in the relationships between the Master Gardeners and the consumer hort folks. Yes.
Just to echo what Nancy was talking about, you know, when the 72 educator positions were lost, you know, that was really compounded because at the same time there were county staff positions and support staff positions that were lost. So many of us, you know, were like we had people but no home, you know. So there was a lot going on at that time, and then the team that's left had some pretty strong county funding and strong county ties. So, you know, my thinking, and this isn't something that I expect you to answer today, but, you know, my thinking is, you know, is there a vision for increased staffing and regionalizing programs and that kind of thing? And like, what's the vision for truly making it a statewide program? And you don't have to answer that right now. I'm just
Food for thought.
I know. But I guess maybe my question then, to Mary said, yeah. So my question is, you know, from an administrative point of view, my understanding is that MSU Extension Administration understands that and they value that. And, you know, that whole idea of investing in the growth over time is an important thing.
So let me just say two things. And of course it's being recorded, so I have to be careful. One of the reasons that I've become very interested in pushing for more strategic planning and position planning across MSU Extension, that's across all 4 institutes, whether it's Ag and Agribusiness, Health, Nutrition, Children and Youth, or the Greening Institute, is so we can do some planning and knowing where we can put resources. And we still have some good state resources, some federal resources, and very good county partners. But we need to be able to think down the road when positions become open, where do we want to put them? And do we need to move things around a bit? On campus, and I'm most familiar with how we handle faculty positions, a lot of it is basically everything comes to one central place, and then we figure out the best way to work with the resources to put positions where we need them the most. And so part of the reason why your planning process isn't so important, as well as having the Consumer Hort team think about their own strategic planning within the Institute, is so that we can think about those things, know where we can put the resources and when we can put the resources when they become available. The other area that I've been thinking about, and again I'm going to talk out loud and probably get myself into trouble, is looking for other partners to help support the programs, whether it's through grants or through working with the different plant industries. I keep coming back to the fact is that as production agriculture grows, as interests in community gardens grow, as small agriculture grows, and basically as people become more interested in their homes and growing things, we need to have more awareness of problems. We have to have folks with the education and training to help the home gardeners actually know what to plant, when to plant it, when to look for problems, what to do with a problem if you see one. How do you get a sample taken? How do you do these things? And this is a positive thing not only for the folks you work with, but if I think about this in a broader scale, it's positive for the plant industries in the state because they supply the ornamentals, the perennials. They supply a lot of the transplants for vegetables. They also want to enhance their own productivity. And so in a couple of ways you can help by educating and protecting the plants that are out there, by working with the folks that come to your training sessions. At the same time, you end up being great salespersons for the diversity of plant agriculture in Michigan. So as I think about, what I would select to plant in my front yard, and trust me, I won't be doing those selections. In the bigger picture, I'm helping to support the nursery and landscape industry, even in a very small way, but I need advice doing these kinds of things. And that's something you can do, and that's a way that we can begin to maybe build some connections with some of the major plant industries. And that's something which I've actually told Mary that I was going to be working on, is talking with some of the industry leaders to see how, in even some small ways, we can partner with them on some programs or support or other things along those lines that can help grow the Master Gardener program, grow its visibility, show its connection to Extension, and move things forward. But in other words, I'm always looking for ways to find funds to do things. Yes, ma'am.
Is there, you mentioned the 4 institutes. It sounds ag, health, youth,
Right.
and green. Is there any umbrella organization that coordinates or integrates or, talks to each other?
Well, I guess that would be me, wouldn't it? So the question is, we have 4 institutes, and how do they coordinate together? Well, we are working more and more to make sure that we have cross-institute programs. There are now four institute directors. The Ag Institute had been without a director for the last 6 or 8 months. We now have a new person in that place, Ron Bates, who is a extension specialist in animal sciences, but it doesn't matter because I'll teach him plant things very quickly, and he's willing to learn. But one of the things we want to foster are those connections between the institutes. What you do cuts across everything we do in Extension. I mean, it's youth, it's health, it's nutrition, it's natural resources. It's beyond just the gardening part. And so what I look, in some ways, what you're doing and what the Consumer Hort team does is really already function as a cross-institute organization just by the kinds of things that they do. So can we connect more closely with the children and youth programs and the 4-H programs? Absolutely, we can do that, and we can have those discussions. Health and nutrition, the same thing. I mean, you have nothing better than having fresh vegetables out of the garden in the summertime, but also working with the health and nutrition folks so that if you do canning or preserving in some way, you end up with a safe product. So it ties into food safety, and I could probably go on and on and on all day as to how what you do impacts just about everything, or can find a little niche in everything we do in Extension. So that's a very good point, and something which we want to keep sort of pushing the integration of programs wherever possible. Yes, ma'am.
My question kind of follows Rebecca's a little bit. Mary was kind enough to show us a map of the Consumer Hort team staff that is working on all of this, and I don't know if you have you seen the map? Do you see that the huge gap that's the northern lower half of the peninsula?
Yes.
And are you already just
Yes.
starting to make the discussions about how to fill that gap?
And that will come through our planning processes to figure out where we can allocate the resources in the future. It's an interesting point. I have maps for other areas of ag, for example, and every group can show me a map with big gaps in different places. But I think by knowing this, we can begin to address these things in the long term. I don't think we can do anything immediately, but if we plan for it and start looking for the right resources, as we have retirements, as we have increases in the state, the governor has recommended a 2% increase for extension and ag bio research, which I think is exceptional considering what some of the state agencies are going to be facing in terms of cuts. So we have some opportunities to begin planning carefully and looking at where these gaps are and how we can tap into other resources to help fill with these things, whether it's established educators who may be able to do a little additional programming when they hadn't for the last several years, or actually finding positions to place there. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's very important for Extension to know that the Master Gardener program are your local advocates. You know, when you guys get slammed by the state or the federal government and we have a distant relationship between each other, you have lost that advocacy group on a local level to contact legislatures and say, hey, you know, we need 4-H, we need the Master Gardener program. This is really important to our local community. So by expanding the Master Gardener program, you have voices throughout the state then to help Extension get more funding than to help everyone in our state. And I think that's important to know.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the local advocacy part is important for the programs, and it's important for everything we do in the College of Ag and Extension and Ag Bio Research. One of the things which, when Maggie Bethel was back for her 6-month stint as interim director, and we talked a lot about local engagement and being much more of a bottom-up organization again. Whether it's production agriculture or issues related to health and nutrition or issues related to local and state government or whatever we're involved in, we need to focus our priorities based on what the issues are that are coming from us from the field. And so this exercise you've been going through is exactly the kinds of things that need to be done to begin to re-engage folks and find out what the issues are, to bring everyone back into the program, to make it your program, as well as an MSU program. It's basically everybody's program. One of the things that Maggie's going to be doing, and actually I hired her back part-time, this is part of the deal, is to reinvigorate and continue to strengthen what are now called the district councils. Since we don't have county extension directors in all the counties, the district councils are the ones that are really our representatives for getting feedback out in the state, and they're run by the different district coordinators. She's going to be working with those councils to strengthen them, to help them be better advocates for everything that the citizens are looking at as priorities, and leading us into a more statewide issue identification process, probably in about a year or so from now, which will be led by the council. So we want to be able to collect this information as much as possible. Some of the teams in ag and agribusiness do this anyway. The field crops team, for example, did a little bit of a issue test checking last summer where they had focus groups around the state asking the questions similar to the kinds of things you've been asked in these surveys. You know, what do we need? What do you need? What are we doing well? What are we not doing so well? And listening to priorities. But unless we have get our priorities right, and unless we can start with the local issues and build those into regional issues and then to statewide issues, we're not going to succeed in anything we do. We have to find out what the needs are. And then in those cases, if there's something we can't do now or can't do right away, or if there's a better outlet for it, then we'll be honest and indicate that maybe we can find a different path to do this. I don't see any other way of working with Master Gardeners than keeping it an integral part of what we do in the overall umbrella of agricultural programs in the state as well as the matching ones. But again, keeping you involved, keeping you informed with what we're doing, and most importantly, keeping you on our side is so important. I don't particularly want to relive what happened a number of years ago when we were all eliminated for, what recommended for elimination back, 10 years ago, 8 years ago now. So, and fortunately we had the strength out there to do it, but we continue to need this support, and the only way you can have your support is if we get your trust back and we listen to you. Yes.
I think excuse me. I think it's also important to address our image in the communities among people who are not master gardeners. They have, a lot of them have this image of us as some elite group of people who know everything about gardening, rather than people who do not know all the answers but know how to find the answers. And they don't realize that the most important word in our title is volunteer. And they don't know what we can do to help their communities. So I think it's really important to address that part.
Yeah. No, and that's a tough thing, because it's nothing which I haven't really, I've heard a little bit about this, but I can understand where you're coming from, and they somewhere got the wrong impression from someone, and it's hard to reel back information that goes out that's bad. But I think, providing the trainings and basically being open is the fact. It's like I perfectly admit that if there's something I don't know, then I try to find the person who knows that information, and that would help generate that credibility, but also show that we're all the same. We're all the same kind of people, and we don't know everything. But the important thing is that you have connections to resources that you can connect them with if you don't know that, and that they, through that information, can connect themselves. But I can see that it's an image that's going to take a little time to reel in, and anything we can do through our educators and staff to help with that as being sources of information or indicating more clearly what your roles are, I think would slowly help change that image. Yes, ma'am.
I'll just pony on to everything that has already been said. I think the key word is partnership. Leadership isn't a good leader if you have a boss down, is a top down. I'll tell you what to do and then you do it. I'll give you the orders and you make them work. The organization will thrive when it's a grassroots, a come up, and that no fear to say what you believe and how it's working for you. Partnerships and the feedback that you feel safe to give to our leaders is the key to success.
I couldn't agree with you more. The partnerships are essential, and as I mentioned before, being a bottom-up, organically driven organization is really important, because that gets everyone involved. Everyone has a stake in both the success and therefore the failures, and that's why this time that you're spending together is so important as a starting place to basically get those priorities up from the bottom, to find out what the needs are, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, both within the organization in general, as well as what we can do from campus to improve things for the consumer hort team and the other folks that can contribute to these efforts from other parts of MSUE in the field, as well as the specialists on campus.